If you were raised by a narcissist, you don't have self-esteem problems. You have a fragmented sense of self that swings between grandiosity and worthlessness, depending on whether you're mirroring the parent or failing to meet impossible standards. Understanding this pattern is the first step to recognizing it in yourself. You have a mirror problem. If you were raised by a narcissist, you don't have low self-esteem. You have a fragmented sense of self that swings between grandiosity and worthlessness. You became a mirror, and mirrors don't create. They only reflect. Your identity is fragmented because you're broken. It's fragmented because you learned to mirror to survive. It's fragmented because you learned early that who you are depends on who others need. A narcissistic parent isn't just critical or demanding. They replace your internal compass with a mirror. You learn to reflect, not to think. This rewires who you become. They are emotionally unavailable while simultaneously demanding emotional management. This creates a cognitive paradox in the developing child. You become hyper-attuned to their emotional state, reading micro-expressions, adjusting your own mood as a protective mechanism while your own emotional world remains invisible, unvalidated, and ultimately unknowable to you. The child learns the skill of emotional labor before learning the skill of emotional literacy. They need constant reflection of their importance, their pain, their narrative, and you became the surface they looked into. When therapists talk about narcissistic parenting, people picture yelling or coldness, but the real damage is often invisible. But the real damage happens in the silence between moments. We spend endless time discussing depression versus anxiety, validation versus boundaries, but the children of narcissists live in a third space, a fractured identity that swings violently between believing they are everything and knowing they are nothing. This pattern wasn't random. It was built deliberately, one moment at a time. The core experience of a child raised by a narcissist is this: you learn to monitor every micro-expression, every tone shift, every pause in the room, not because you were sensitive, but because your physical safety and your sense of belonging depended on reading an unreadable person. Research from the Journal of Personality Disorders shows that children of narcissistic parents develop what's called contingent self-worth, meaning their entire identity is reactive rather than internal. The psychological lesson is sharp. When a parent's love is conditional on your ability to meet their needs, you stop developing a self, you develop a scanner. Your earliest environment was one where emotions weren't processed, they were performed. You learned to read the room, not yourself. Every feeling became a mirror. If your narcissistic parent was angry, you weren't angry. You were responsible for managing their anger. If they were sad, you weren't sad. You were the container for their sadness. Because a narcissist's needs are infinite, contradictory, and centered on their own survival, today they need you to be confident, tomorrow they need you to doubt yourself so they feel superior. Today they need your attention, tomorrow they need you invisible so you don't threaten them. These aren't parenting choices. This is a person trying to keep themselves alive emotionally, psychologically, by controlling the only thing they think they can. And the goalpost never stops moving because their survival instinct never stops firing. The adult version shows up as hypervigilance. You can walk into a room and sense tension in 30 seconds, but you have no idea what you actually feel. The unspoken promise of childhood is this: if you are good enough, if you are perfect enough, if you are attuned enough to my needs, I will love you. That promise shattered every single time because narcissistic parents cannot love conditionally. They cannot see their children as separate people with inherent worth. When you failed, and you always did, because no child can meet an adult's emotional needs, the message was clear: you are the problem. Statistics from the National Domestic Violence Hotline show that emotional abuse creates the same neurological impact as physical abuse. Your brain learned to anticipate danger constantly. The defense mechanism you built was called defensive hypervigilance, a state of constant threat detection that helped you survive but left you unable to rest. How did this shape your identity? You became two people. One reflected their needs, one survived in silence. There was the person you were when your parent was watching, polished, attuned, almost clairvoyant in your ability to read what they needed. Then there was who you were when they weren't looking, confused, fragmented, unsure if you even existed. This created what I call contingent visibility. You were only real when you were useful, Tucker, A for you. We glean the sum to genvader the BRK. We just are working if you all the tupper tower for you. The adult version is this: you don't feel fully present unless you're performing value alone. You dissolve. Your signature coping mechanism is probably one of two things: perfectionism or people-pleasing, often both intertwined. You trace this back to a specific moment. Maybe you did something small wrong and the response was explosive, or worse, silent withdrawal. You learned that imperfection was dangerous, so you became flawless, or you tried to. Psychologically, this works because control is the only antidote to powerlessness. If you could just be perfect, you could prevent the pain. The core belief that was planted in you came from a series of moments, not one traumatic event. There was the time you told your parent how you felt and they made your emotions about them. Suddenly your pain was their victimhood. There was the time you succeeded at something and they reframed it as their achievement. Your accomplishment was absorbed into their narrative. There was the time you cried and they punished you for it. Emotional expression became dangerous. What took root was this: your internal world is not real, other people's needs are real. Your job is to manage both. Here's the core paradox that defines the adult child of a narcissist. You are simultaneously too sensitive to criticism and completely numb to your own suffering. Criticism feels like annihilation because it echoes a message you've heard your entire life. You are fundamentally wrong. But your own pain, you barely register it. You're so skilled at emotional suppression that you don't realize you're drowning until someone else names it. One moment you're overreacting to a perceived slight from a colleague. The next moment you're minimizing a genuine betrayal from a close friend. You swing between extremes, hypervigilant to small wounds, numb to deep ones, and neither response feels like you. This isn't emotional instability. This is identity fragmentation, the learned survival pattern of a child raised by a narcissist, still searching for the right version of yourself to mirror. Both responses come from the same wound, the collapse of your ability to trust your own perception. What you respect in authority, what you cling to, is clarity and consistency, the things your parent never provided. What you reject is emotional manipulation disguised as concern. The pattern your parent perfected. You learn this from four forces: the unpredictability of your parents' moods, the message that your needs were inconvenient, the model that love means control, and the experience that visibility only brought harm. The wound deepened at specific ages and moments, not all at once, but layered. Each time the parent withdrew approval, the child's nervous system recorded it as danger. Each time criticism came, the brain learned your needs are not real, your feelings are not valid. These weren't single traumas, they were repetitions, and repetition rewires everything. Around age 5 or 6, you realized your parent was not going to comfort you the way your friends' parents did. Shame took root. Around age 12, you started achieving not from joy but from desperation. If you were exceptional, maybe you'd finally matter. The achiever's trap began. Around age 18, you left home, but never actually left. The voice in your head became your parents' voice. Psychological adaptation. You became your own narcissist. Now, in adulthood, your coping style looks like a strength from the outside: emotional intelligence, achievement, loyalty, insight. But research from Bessel van der Kolk's neuroscience work shows that hypervigilance physically alters the amygdala, your threat detection center, making you more reactive to perceived danger than actual danger. Not because you're broken, but because your survival system is still running the program it learned. Your brain is still protecting you from a threat that no longer exists. The person who was supposed to keep you safe but didn't. How do you process the world? You likely use a cognitive pattern called narrative identity. Narrative identity, it's the ongoing story you tell yourself about who you are, what you deserve, and how the world works. For children raised by narcissists, this narrative was written by someone else, and you've been reading from their script ever since. You construct stories about yourself and others that feel fixed and true, but they're actually distorted reflections of what your parent taught you. You mind read constantly. They're judging me, they think I'm not enough, I should have known what they needed. Mind read bus. Any deal so drawit limaji and befitsa mind read bus. You catastrophize. One mistake means total failure. This isn't pessimism, it's a survival reflex inherited from a parent who treated every small error as evidence of your unworthiness. You think in black and white you're either perfect or worthless. Others are either trustworthy or dangerous. These weren't character flaws. They were taught directly by a parent who thought the same way. What does this produce in your relationships and adult life? A fragmented identity that swings between golden child and scapegoat, sometimes both in a single day. Hypervigilance that reads a room in seconds but cannot trust your own needs. Success becomes a compulsion, not a choice, and it never feels like enough. You inherited distorted thinking patterns, catastrophizing, black and white reasoning, mind reading, so normalized you didn't recognize them as pathological until adulthood. And perhaps most painfully, you became hyper-empathic to others while being emotionally abandoned yourself, creating a lifelong pattern of giving from an empty cup. The question isn't whether you're broken. The question is, can you learn to see yourself, rather than only see what others need from you? You choose partners who are vaguely emotionally unavailable because that's what love feels like to you. It's familiar, it's safe, it's the only pattern you know. You give compulsively, then feel resentment when no one gives back, but you never asked. You don't know how. In parenting, if you have children, you either replicate your parents' patterns or swing to the opposite extreme, sometimes both with different children. In friendships, you're the listener, the fixer, the one who holds space, but you never let anyone hold space for you. In work, you're the high achiever who never feels satisfied, the person who takes on impossible projects because saying no feels dangerous. This isn't ambition, it's a survival pattern. The narcissistic parent taught you that your worth equals your output. Rest feels like failure, boundaries feel like abandonment, so you keep climbing, keep proving, keep earning approval that was never actually conditional on anything you do. The achievement treadmill has no finish line. The embedded fear underneath all of this is simple: if I stop performing, if I stop being useful, if I stop reading your needs, I will be abandoned. That fear was taught young, it's still running now. But here's what changes when you can name this pattern. You realize you are not your parents' mirror anymore. You were raised by someone who used you as a surface for their own reflection, but you are not a mirror. Mirrors don't choose, they don't feel, they don't have an internal compass. You do, you always have. The mirror never stops reflecting what it sees. The reflection was never who you are, it was only what your parent needed to see. Your job now, and it's hard work, is learning to see yourself without that mirror in the way. That means sitting with discomfort when you can read the room perfectly and recognizing you're not responsible for managing other people's emotions. It means allowing yourself to need things and asking for them directly instead of hoping someone will notice. It means recognizing that your achievements belong to you, not to a parent's narratives. It means understanding that your body, your emotions, your thoughts, these are real and valid even when no one is watching. Healing isn't about blaming your parent or severing all connection, though some people choose that path. Healing is about reclaiming the authority to know yourself, to trust yourself, to matter independently of anyone else's opinion. You're not broken, you're adapted. There's a difference. Adaptation is survival, not pathology. You were remarkably resilient in an impossible situation. The hypervigilance, the perfectionism, the people-pleasing. These protected you when you needed protection. But you don't need that protection anymore, and now the question becomes, who do you want to be without it? If any of this resonated, consider talking to a trauma-informed therapist who specializes in narcissistic family dynamics. You don't have to figure this out alone. And if you found something true in this, share it with someone who might recognize themselves in these words, because somewhere right now, someone is wondering if they're the problem. They're not. They're just finally seeing the mirror clearly.